Easy guys, how the devil are you? In this video I play the CDDA challenge for the first time, one of the most demanding scenarios in Project Zomboid, for 6 hours straight. This kind of challenge demands a good feel for the game and a dash of luck, neither of which I had. Instead, this would be a 6-hour battle of torment and anguish, with plenty of mistakes along the way. To make matters worse, I hadn't played in a few months. Yet I still wanted to give this challenge a go and share my journey. The premise for the challenge begins after getting out of the shower. My character falls badly, lodging a large piece of glass right next to the family jewels. He's blind drunk, has a nasty cold, and on top of all this, the house is on fire. To survive this challenge, I needed a hero renowned for his sheer ability to survive. Sean Bean, the obese burglar. The house is already on fire as I begin. My first thoughts were to get out of here. I made straight for the door, but I can't get past the table, forcing me to take the long way round to the front door. After leaving the house, I was immediately pursued by what was left of the neighbours. Unable to make much speed due to a shard of glass being buried deep in my groin. My first thought was heading to the tree line to see if I could lose my pursuers in the undergrowth. Sadly, this didn't go to plan.
Come on then!
I needed to figure out what I wanted to do on my next run. I needed to get some clothes and see if I could deal with this shard of glass holding my plum sack hostage. I also could do with some food and a place to take shelter. This house looked like a good place to start. I was using the old burglar fingers here to jimmy the window open. It wasn't long before I realised my mistake. I had sealed myself in. Panic ensued. Fight, Sean, fight! It was here it dawned on me. I should have reintroduced myself to Project Zomboid on some easier difficulty settings instead of CDDA, but still, I pushed on. I've bit off more than I could chew, but surely I would make progress eventually. As I exit, I'm so blind to the confusion that I don't even notice the open door, heading straight back to the now smashed window I entered through, stepping all over the broken glass on the floor with my bare feet. It wasn't long before the inevitable happened.
Come on then!
Back I went into the burning fire. Was this hell? No, Sean Bean had been resurrected once more. Nothing like a fire to burn out a bad cold. Kills all known germs. Rest in peace, Sean's gonads. Burnt to a crisp. Nope, too much fire.
Come on then!
As my runs continued, I started to realise the futility of my situation. The cold I started the game with caused constant sneezing and pulled in zombies from all around. I just wanted somewhere to stop, reprieve and tend to my wounds. The most difficult part of the challenge would be the beginning, just trying to get a foothold somewhere safe. The challenge would ease if I could survive the first night or two, at least that's what I thought. After several deaths and working my way back through the menus to restart the challenge, I simply made a new character. I didn't know whether I would make things easier or more difficult for myself by doing this, but it saved me from going back through the menus and setting the challenge up again and again each time I died. It was all starting to come back to me. I started searching the cupboards for food, a few cans to get my hopes up, but no can opener to bring my spirits down again. It wasn't long before the neighbours noticed I was back. My efforts to escape only pulled more zombies. This wasn't good. I would love to tell you how I started to evolve as a player and made solid progress towards survival, but sadly, only a montage of pain awaited me.
Come on then!
Even when I started to make a little progress, if the zombies didn't get me, I would die quickly from overexertion or my wounds.
Come on then!
The constant sneezing made it nearly impossible to be stealthy and sneak around zombies. I never played a scenario that suited Project Zomboid's introductory words more fittingly. This is how I would die. But no Sean Bean had ever feared death before.
Come on then!
I pushed on. I almost got some clothes to wear from the zombies I killed, but just as I tried to grab what I could, more zombies joined the chase. If only I could rip up a few clothes, I could bandage my wound and prevent myself from bleeding out. This was my next few in-game days. A series of hard lessons. Barely able to get on the first step of the ladder before being overwhelmed. It wasn't long before I started to see more Sean Beans, a reminder of my previous mistakes. Perhaps making a new character each time wasn't the best way. However, it had its perks. Sometimes I could find piles of my previous kills, and I managed to start getting a foothold here. I would wear anything, a bra or a dress. There was no one left to judge me. More importantly, some shoes to protect my feet from broken glass and scratches in the undergrowth. It's strange how you can take simple things like shoes for granted in more accessible difficulty settings due to their abundance. It's only without shoes that you realize their importance. The amount of times I'd waddled through broken glass and cut my feet, accelerating my demise, was numerous. This was my first run where I felt like I had time to look at my wound. I had already lost a fair amount of health in my delay in stopping the bleeding. A bandage made from ripped clothing would suffice for now. I started heading east. As I got my bearings from my previous playthroughs, I knew there would be a quiet farming area nearby with fewer zombie spawns, where I might get some reprieve from the constant onslaught. But it was a difficult journey.
Come on then!
Yet despite regular deaths, I was surviving longer each time. Almost an hour now instead of 30 minutes. I would make progress, even if it was just a little. My montage of suffering continued. I didn't want to overexert myself fighting hordes of zombies in the first few hours, yet it frequently felt inevitable. Fighting or running were tiresome exercises that left Sean hanging on by a thread.
Come on then!
It wasn't long before night came. As if my ongoing challenge wasn't hard enough, I wandered blindly into the darkness to accept my fate. Barely able to see anything unless it was directly in front of my face.
Come on then!
A new Sean Bean would rise again to avenge the last, before being overwhelmed in the darkness. Over and over again. The night times were the worst, yet still, Sean pushed on. I started trying to head east again. Although I kept reconsidering this, there were so many zombies around. Tired and in immense pain, I was frequently pursued until exhaustion. Sometimes I tried to make the journey half naked, which went as well as to be expected. Sometimes I gave up, knowing I could start again with a fresh Sean Bean. The struggle was real. Each time I would try to get a foothold before being overrun. Sometimes I made stupid mistakes. Others I felt I faced the impossible, but the result was always the same. Wherever I seemed to go, I struggled to lose my little entourage of zombies, even through the trees and bushes where I attempted in vain to shake them. I was too scared to sprint, fearing this would only accelerate my exhaustion. But with every Sean Bean came a silver lining. I was starting to survive a couple of hours now, and while a few more aimless deaths would follow, I made my way to the farmhouse on a few occasions. Although there always seemed to be more zombies around than I could handle. Each time I would die, and die again. As I repeated this never-ending cycle of death and rebirth, I started to memorize the local area, and even where some of the more troublesome packs of zombies were. I started making sacrificial Sean Beans, whose job was to try and lead as many zombies as they could north and south of the farmhouse to clear a path for Sean Beans to follow. Daytime, at last. My progress began to refine itself. Shoes, bandages, farmhouse. There were always a few stragglers around this fenced field area, and a couple of Sean Beans. I tried to stay in the bushes for as long as possible around the side of the farmhouse to attract as little attention as possible, and see if I could dash to the house itself. The coast was clear, just the odd straggler to deal with. Then a few more zombies appeared. I could deal with 3 in a pinch, but after being bitten and having no weapon to hand, I lost my nerve and returned to the bushes. I tried to ambush the zombies that followed, but as usual, I quickly became overwhelmed. Even so, I got a lucky break as their numbers thinned out a little, allowing me to take another shot at the farmhouse. If only I had a weapon, I could thin these stragglers out a little bit. But I had no idea where to find one. I took control for a brief moment, but then more came. I could feel myself getting weaker, the constant fighting draining my strength. I couldn't keep this up, and once again, I retreated back to the safety of the bushes. Made my way round the back of the farm and took another shot at the farmhouse. This time, I got in. I retreated upstairs, desperate to see if I could get some distance between the zombies and myself to earn some rest. But as I tried, I heard more come in. I climbed out the window, hoping to make a crafty escape before falling off the roof and sealing my fate.
Come on then!
I made another run for the farmhouse, using the fenced area to help pick off zombies that fell over the fence. I'd leave any unneeded items on the bodies for future Sean Beans, as well as deal with any Sean Beans from the past. I pulled the glass out and bandaged the wound. I wasn't sure if I should leave the shard of glass in or pull it out, as I had little disinfectant to avoid infection. Immediately after pulling the glass out, I was slower. Would the disadvantages be outweighed by the benefits later on? Was it even worth thinking that far ahead? As I arrived at the farmhouse, I started to gather more locals. The zombie population here wasn't as low as I'd hoped. I was still pulling quite the crowd here, and it felt near impossible without a weapon to deal with them. I made my way to an old friend, the tree line, hoping to lose them there. Night fell once more. It felt like an age tromping through the woodland, trying to lose the zombies I had on tow. Eventually, somehow, somewhere, it felt like I had lost them. Predictably, the darkness presented its own set of problems. I was jumped from nowhere by a zombie in the shadows, and while I managed to push them back, my time spent wandering the forest and keeping my bandages fresh had left me with little health to spare. I simply collapsed from exhaustion.
Come on then!
Next run, I would start the challenge afresh once more. I was still determining whether it made any difference to the difficulty. It was the dead of night again, but I found a meat cleaver in one of the houses nearby to use as a weapon. With something to fight with, I finally felt more confident. Visibility could have been better. As usual, I was mobbed in the darkness, and my cleaver did little to help me. My next run was largely similar. This time I headed west to look around some of the houses there. Ultimately, I pulled another large group, and the lack of light made managing escape difficult. I was scratched and bleeding, and my groin bandage had become dirty. I needed to rest and tend to my wounds. I found a pile of corpses left by a previous Sean Bean, giving me that welcome opportunity to sort myself out. I dealt with a few stragglers, fine if I could deal with them one at a time. And I tended my wounds. Although my health was low now, I was beginning to become exhausted. I felt that this Sean Bean's future was ebbing away. I made my way towards the farmhouse again, yet out of the mist came 3-4 more zombies. With a slither of health remaining, I knew at this point my time remaining would be short. For my next run, I headed straight to the pile of corpses I left on my previous run. They gave me easy access to some shoes, clothes and bandages. I moved on, but as usual, my persistent sneezing attracted a large group. I thought to drag them back to the fence, hoping I could cause them all to fall over and give me an advantage, but there ended up being too many to handle. I made a run for it, but in the end I spent too much time trying to overcome them instead of running. Surprisingly, I sometimes became more careless during the CDDA challenge than in lower difficulty runs of Zomboid. I felt like I had nothing to lose except a pair of shoes. Repeatedly starting the challenge made my character feel almost disposable. The second things started to look bleak, or I became exhausted, I felt inclined to start again rather than keep pushing. Next, I went looking for a weapon of some kind, something to help me deal with the small groups. In the first house, I overcame a single occupant, did the usual shoes, clothes and a bandage routine I started to become quite familiar with. I headed further west. 2 zombies I felt I could deal with. If I could try and stand on one, preventing it from getting up, I could push the other one. Then a third came, then a fourth and a fifth. These zombies were relentless. I dashed it. What else could I do? I was always reluctant to sprint as it quickly exhausted Sean, making everything worse. Still, it felt like my only option to escape, trying to use it sparingly without leaving Sean in a worse situation. I scouted around the back of some more houses, looking for opportunity. 2 zombies appeared. 2 I might manage, but 3... Once again, I was on the back foot. I made for the tree line in hopes of losing my new fan club. At last, a second reprieve. At this point, I might make another pass at the farmhouse, picking off a few more zombies. Unlucky. I was snagged and picked up 2 lacerations. I bled out quicker than a flush toilet, and I collapsed.
on then.
Sean Bean woke again. This time, I headed west once more. Every plan or path I had chosen thus far had ended in disaster, so I was still determining what to try. I'd already scratched my feet on some broken glass. A great start. 2 zombies, my first source of clothes and footwear. I found another house, a woman locked in the bedroom. 1 zombie I could handle. Then, a familiar face at the window. It was Sean Bean. I finished him and went to look for, well, anything. Canned food, but no can opener. Another zombie dropped in to say hello. I returned the greeting and headed west once more. I felt there was more opportunity for loot this way. I found one of the small cabins, and once the coast looked clear, I nipped inside to see what I could find. But I couldn't sleep due to the pain. I did try to take opportunities to rest. Something, anything. I removed and replaced my bandages. I ventured west to the corner shop, but there were too many zombies there, so I dashed it and pulled the old fence trick, hopped over, and then put some distance between myself and the tumbling zombies. Farther east I went, but darkness soon began to fall. I wandered for some time in the darkness, my bandage dirty, my health dropping, until inevitably I was surprised in the darkness. Another scratch, just what I needed. I desperately attempted to bandage myself on the fly. I didn't take the dirty bandage off my groin injury and risk bleeding out. In the end, I simply collapsed and died.
Come on then.
As it was nighttime, my next few attempts yielded similar results. Visibility was poor, and it was difficult to spot an ambush. Next, I decided to look for a weapon again. Many of the houses close by I had already looted, the wealth of which had been spread around the map by various Sean Beans now waiting in the shadows. All I needed was shoes and a bandage, and daylight soon broke. A welcome relief. I found some basic clothes, and my old stand on the fallen zombie whilst pushing the other trick proved successful, if slightly precarious. Still, I found myself a set of scissors for protection. I worked towards the convenience store, carefully picking off 1 zombie at a time. I can't say my scissors were particularly effective, but a weapon was a weapon. I swapped the scissors out for a screwdriver. The convenience store was bone dry. As to be expected. I was surprised by 2 more zombies. Unfortunately, I bungled at my defense and received a laceration, swiftly followed by an ambush from the right. Very quickly, Sean Bean was doomed.
Come on then.
Next, I went north through the wealthy residential areas, which looked infested. Predictably, my outcome was certain. I'd want to avoid this area in future. The usual bandage and shoe run commenced, after which I searched for a weapon. Still having little idea what would allow me to survive my first day, I found a house that looked interesting, and my thoughts of this being some kind of potential shelter for me to rest grew. The coast was clear outside, not a zombie to be seen. Like clockwork, visitors were outside the house the second I stepped inside. I did my best to deal with the visitors and picked up a scratch in the panic. Luckily, the clothes on their backs had brought a fresh supply of ripped bandage sheets. I did my best to clear the stragglers and explored the rest of the house. The front door was missing, diminishing the house's potential. However, I found a crowbar upstairs and a wood axe. My new weapons gave me some confidence. Although the wood axe was a slow 2-handed weapon and felt unwieldy, I switched to the crowbar. I discovered a new house, and the coast was clear outside. I looked around to ensure I was safe before looking through the cupboards. But just my luck. The second I stepped inside and turned my back, I was surrounded by zombies instantly. It couldn't have been timed better, almost as if they were deliberately spawned in on top of me. I foolishly backed myself into a corner and became overwhelmed.
Come on then.
I quickly traced my steps, picking up some shoes and bandages. I wondered whether crouching for added stealth was even worth it, as every sneeze announced my presence to everything around me. But I decided I should try and be safe than sorry. I bumped into the previous Sean Bean, but I decided sprinting round the house and losing them rather than fighting was the better option. I continued on, but they soon caught up with me. And even though I tried the old fence trick to thin their numbers, I could feel myself getting outnumbered from all angles. I kept running to get ahead, although I was playing with fire as I became exhausted. I saw a van here, something I wanted to check out, but the relentless pursuit forced me to keep moving. Desperate for a second to catch my breath, and bandaged my wound. I moved into the woodland and I got a small reprieve at the fence, the old fence trick affording me a few zombie kills and a chance to bandage myself. But more and more came, and I was forced to move once again. It was getting on top of me now. My attempts to thwart and overcome my pursuers only ended up in a few more scratches and even more zombies. I lost some to gain a few more. My health was getting low, and I had countless dirty bandages and small wounds to attend. The future of this Sean Bean was looking bleak. I came to a white picket fence and I tried to vault over it, but couldn't. Either it was too tall or I was just too exhausted. Either way, the time it took me to attempt it cost Sean's life.
Come on then!
I retraced my steps once more, and darkness fell. I prepared myself for a night of death and misery, but not before I found myself a bandage and this time, a shovel. I broke into a home and closed the door behind me. To my surprise, I wasn't immediately overwhelmed by zombies and felt the immediate desire to stay here for a while. The darkness outside was surely a death sentence, but I had no food, and the pain wouldn't let me sleep. So, ultimately, I returned to the darkness. I picked up a few scratches in the undergrowth, followed by a laceration from a hidden zombie. It was difficult to avoid walking straight into them. In the end, I made it to the farmhouse. The door was locked, but the old burglar fingers worked a treat on the sliding window, and I jumped in. But with an unattended laceration on my upper arm, I simply died.
Come on then!
As I started again, I started to learn all the locations I could get bitten. Scratches, bites and lacerations, and how quickly they would kill me. This bite to the neck dropped my health quicker than it took me to end the fight. After I got that out of my system, I started to have yet another run at the farmhouse. I'd become more confident, trying to sprint. It certainly had its advantages, enabling me to distance myself and shake a pack of zombies quickly. I'd always been cautious about sprinting in my easier playthroughs as there never appeared to be much need. There were many detriments to running, and the zombies were too slow to catch me when I was walking anyway, so there didn't seem much point. The drawback here was becoming too used to it and leaving myself exhausted, at which point I could run no more. When I arrived, it seemed there were the usual suspects. The farmhouse was never as quiet as I'd hoped. I needed to clear the zombies around the house, yet I had little strength. Eventually, I died round the back of an animal shelter. At least the daylight had returned, perking my spirits. As usual, I grabbed myself a bandage and some shoes. I found a new house this time around. I removed the curtains to use as spare bandages and had a snoop around the storage areas and was blessed with a military jacket with a good bite and scratch defense. I kept searching the nearby houses. I welcomed these moments where unexpectedly I would have some peace to tend my bandages and sort my inventory. I ventured on in search of anything. One zombie at a time as I ventured forth, I came across an old friend, a spawn house with high fences. I could fortify this location, but to learn the skills required to do so seemed like a pipe dream, added to the fact I could barely survive a day, let alone long enough to build. The coast looked clear. It didn't seem long after I closed the door that zombies appeared from nowhere again. I rushed outside, concerned I would get pinned inside again. If I could do the old stand on one whilst I pushed the other down, I might have a chance at clearing these out. But when a fourth zombie arrived, followed by a distant fifth, I decided to abort. A short sprint and I'd lost them, followed by a few more stragglers. Now, I was getting tired. I needed to get out of there. I ventured to the farmhouse once more. I desperately needed food and rest. The coast was clear. I looked upstairs, but I was ambushed by what looked like another Sean Bean. It took an age to silence the other Sean, a testament to how weak and exhausted I had become. I ventured back downstairs, only to find it populated with more zombies. The outcome was bleak. My 6 hours on CDDA taught me that this was no place for noobs. I enjoyed it as much as it frustrated me at times, but I came to appreciate the increased difficulty. When every tiny bad decision has real consequences, I learned as much in 6 hours of CDDA as I had in my previous 60 hours of Zomboid. Goodbye.